Hi, everybody. Welcome to English Digest. I'm Stephanie.
I'm Tom.
Hey, it's our history unit. This is another one of my favorite units. I love history and learning about things, especially their background, where something came from. Sometimes we are only left with rumors or legends or old wives' tales. We really don't know for sure how something started. But this particular unit is about how we got to the word beef when that's not what we call the animals where we get the meat from. For example, we get beef from cows.
Exactly. Yeah. So we've got different words there, and you might be thinking, why is English such a burden? I have to learn two words. I have to learn a separate word for the animal and a separate word for the meat that it produces. In Chinese, of course, it's all the same.
Right.
牛肉, 猪肉, 什么鸡肉, 什么.
Oh, that's true.
It's all very logical in Chinese, but in English, it gets all messed up, and you might be wondering why that is. And that's what we're going to try to tell you today, why exactly we have separate words for the animal and the meat that animal produces. So let's find out some more about this interesting topic. Let's read the entire contents of our lesson right now.
Do you enjoy sinking your teeth into a nice chunk of cow? Or a crispy piece of pig back meat? Chances are that you do. Though you're more likely to call these dishes beef and bacon. But why do the words for these animals change after they're killed and served? And why does this shift only happen with certain meats? To answer these questions, we have to step back almost 1,000 years into the past, as the prevailing theory is that this linguistic phenomenon results from the Norman invasion of England. In 1066, the old French-speaking Normans conquered the Anglo-Saxons, who spoke Old English. The Norman rulers imposed various measures of oppression on their new subjects, but they also introduced their language. They used French words for the meat that appeared on their tables. Meanwhile, the Old English words were still used by the Anglo-Saxons who farmed and herded the animals. Such was the Norman influence on England that their terms for meat have stuck around in the modern English language for cuisine. Cow, beef. It's not just adult cows that acquired a new name after they were killed and prepared for Norman feasts. A young cow is called a calf, and this word comes from Old English. However, the animal is transformed into veal when it appears on a plate. Pig. Pork. As well as the word pig, which, like cow, has Old English origins, the Anglo-Saxons used to use the word swine for these animals. Both became pork when the Normans consumed their meat, though. Chicken. Chicken is one of several exceptions to this general change in terminology. When the Normans used the French word poulet for chicken meat, this became pullet in English. This word is only really utilized by chicken farmers and refers to young hens. No one is quite sure why this occurred. Fish. Here's another exception, as fish is fish regardless of whether it's swimming in a river or gracing a dinner table. One possibility for why the French word poisson has never entered the English language is that it's too close to poison, something no one wants to eat.
Okay, let's discuss the contents of our history lesson for today. We're talking about a range of words here from cow to beef, from pig to pork, etc., and we're talking about the reason behind the change in words. So, of course, beef is the meat that comes from a cow, which technically is the female cattle, but we generally use the word cow to refer to all those kinds of animals that produce beef, although we wouldn't call oxen cows.
No.
Those are oxen or an ox. which is a similar animal, but in any case, we're talking about the reason why we have different words for the animal and for the meat that comes from the animal. And we begin with the first paragraph by saying, do you enjoy sinking your teeth into a nice chunk of cow? Okay, sink your teeth into something generally means you just enjoy eating something. It could also mean you kind of enjoy a particular activity. Sink your teeth into this particular activity, but generally it just means you're having a hearty meal. It's really enjoyable. Yeah, I'm going to sink my teeth into a nice piping hot bowl of beef noodles.
Yeah. So what's this word chunk mean? Chunk just means a big, thick, solid piece of something. It could be huge or it could be very small. We use chocolate chips or chunks of chocolate in chocolate chip cookies and chocolate chip ice cream. That's an example of chunk. Or maybe you had an accident and you've got a chunk of a tooth missing that you broke off. So here we're asking you if you enjoy sinking your teeth into a nice chunk of cow or a crispy piece of pig back. Pig back meat, what is that? I have to tell you, when I first read it, I wasn't sure. But you're going to find out what pig back meat is in just a second. So chances are that you do. It's true that most people like beef, especially a nice thick piece of meat, or what this pig back meat is going to become in just a second. Though it says you're more likely to call these dishes beef and bacon. Of course, most people I know love bacon. I love bacon. I had bacon today. Yeah, so pig back, the bacon, that portion of meat from the pig comes from the pig's back. That's what that means.
Okay, I did not know that either, but again, these dishes are called beef and bacon, but we're asking the question here, why do the words for these animals change after they're killed and served? So yes, indeed, you can call the animal a pig, but you can't say, here, have some pig. No, you have to say, here, have some pork, and the same goes for a cow or a deer. We've got different words for the meat of those animals as well, and of course, we're talking specifically about a pig here. Why would you want, well, we're talking about bacon from a pig, but also other kinds of meat that come from a pig are called pork. Okay, but beef, of course, comes from a cow. And yes, we're asking this question here. Yeah, why do the words change? And why does this shift only happen with certain meats? It doesn't happen with all of them. It does happen with the pig and the cow. But it does not happen with fish and chicken, which we'll get to later. And here we've got the word shift, which can be both a verb and a noun. Here it's being used as a noun. It just means a change in something. It moves from one thing to another. You might want to shift in your seat if you're uncomfortable, but there I used it as a verb.
Or you can use it also to talk about the focus being changed from one thing to another or the emphasis changing. Here it says we're shifting from one word or one term to another. Why does this shift only happen with certain meats? So we use shift for a lot of things, but here it just means that you're changing your focus or changing something. It's moving from one thing to another. So to answer these questions, we have to step back in time. We're going back almost 1,000 years into the past, as the prevailing theory is that this linguistic phenomenon results from the Norman invasion of England. Now, if you have a prevailing theory or anything that's prevailing, it's something that's widespread, or it could be that it's the most powerful or dominant if you're talking about an idea. But here it just means it's widespread. A lot of people have heard this. But again, it's a theory. It's hard to prove for sure without any sort of, question or doubt. But it's a pretty good theory. And it has something to do with linguistics. Linguistics is just the study of language and how we come up with words and how we use words. People still today study linguistics in college and university.
Yep, and of course the Normans invaded England in 1066, and the English, or the Anglo-Saxons, I should say, lost at the Battle of Hastings in 1066, and therefore the Normans took over England there and changed the culture and changed the language. So, of course, we've got the Normans who are French-speaking, and the old French-speaking Normans conquered the Anglo-Saxons. To conquer just means to take over something or somebody in a battle. Usually it's political, like, for example, the Romans conquered lots of countries during the Roman Empire, and then they were conquered by other people later on. In this particular case, the Normans conquered the people of England at the time, who were called the Anglo-Saxons, and they spoke Old English, which, of course, if you see it written, even native speakers today will have no idea what it's talking about. You might see a word or two in there that look familiar, but basically you'll have no idea what they're saying.
Yeah, it's like a completely different language to us. You can also use conquer, guys, in modern life to talk about overcoming something that is troubling you. Maybe you have a fear of heights, and you conquer your fear of heights so that you can go up to very high places and not be scared to death. Or you conquer your addiction to something. Maybe you're addicted to chocolate. So you overcome that addiction. You're able to control yourself. That's how we use conquer as well. So they conquered the Anglo-Saxons who spoke Old English, and so the Norman rulers imposed various measures of oppression on their new subjects. If you impose something, you make sure that something happens because you usually have the power to force something to take place. You can force something to be accepted or to be put in place because you have some sort of control over that area. Maybe you have imposed rules on your children. They have to be home by 10 o'clock every night. Parents can impose those rules because they have the power. Here they were imposing various measures of oppression. Oppression is when someone has the power to, again, to control you. And sometimes the treatment that you receive is very unjust. It's not kind. Sometimes it's even cruel. If something's oppressive or you're subject to oppression, it's not a good situation for anything, actually.
But being treated cruelly when they rule you, and yes, indeed, they imposed these measures, and they were oppressive measures on their new subjects or on the people they controlled. But they also introduced their language, and that's where we're going to continue after we take a break. So let's take a break right now and listen to our Chinese teacher.
Hello everyone, 我是派老师。今天讲解的是4月25号 Unit 13 From Cow to Beef.The reason behind the changing words. 英文和中文真的是截然不同的语言。或许听众在刚开始学英文就注意到了，中文对于亲戚的称谓特别的精细明确。英文的 uncle 一个字，对应到的可能是叔叔，也可能是伯伯。那但是呢，在中文来说，那我们说到食物的时候，其实也有很多的不同的讲法，但英文呢，其实说到食物这方面，并不比中文逊色。比方说，牛肉跟牛就是完全不一样的单字。不过，大家有没有想过，为什么会这样？原来这跟英国过去曾经受到法国人统治有关系。法文呢，影响了英文的词汇。好，那我们现在一起来看这一篇文章的学习重点。第一段第一句。开头，作者先问 Do you enjoy sinking your teeth into a nice chunk of cow? Or a crispy piece of pig back meat? 同学不晓得有没有觉得这个句子读起来怪怪的？我是觉得怪怪的，倒不是有陌生的单字或片语，而是什么叫做 nice chunk of cow? 好，因为在英文里面我们说牛肉的时候，应该是会说 beef， 不是吗？那再来就是我们后面讲的，这里什么东西叫做pig back meat？pig back meat， 猪背肉又是什么呢？其实英文里面我们通常呢会说 bacon。好， 接下来作者就会跟我们解释了，这到底是什么样的现象。不过，请同学先看到第一句的部分 ，sink your teeth into， 那就是大咬一口 ，OK， 就是咬一口什么。再来，请同学接着往下看，文章开始解释 ，chances are that， 就是很有可能。好，请同学把 chances are that 画起来，很有可能会是这个样子的，就是你真的吃过。OK， 那 though you are more likely to call these dishes beef and bacon， 不过你比较有可能会把这些东西呢称之为 beef 还有 bacon。那接下来作者就告诉我们说，那到底为什么会有这样子的差别呢？好，那我们请看到第二段，作者就开始解释原因了，就是动物跟动物的肉，它在英文里面名称为什么不一样？这里第二段第一句先告诉我们，要回答这个问题，要回到1000年前来看。We have to step back almost 1000 years into the past， 意思是回到过去1000年前来看。那有一个比较普遍的说法 ，the prevailing theory is that， 有一个比较普遍、最广为人知的说法是这样的：原来啊，这个跟1000多年前法国人The Norman Invasion， 法国入侵英国是有关的。那当时说法文的这一群诺曼人，他们呢就征服了盎格鲁撒克逊人。然后呢，第三个句子，请同学看到，这样子的统治者，就是法国的统治者 ，impose various measures of oppression， 他对于呢英国人呢实施了很多压迫的手段，对谁实施什么，把什么加诸于什么人身上，我们用 impose something on someone.
We're going to take a quick break. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. Welcome back, guys. It's our history unit, and we're talking about why we have changed the way we term certain types of meat or fish or things that we eat. They seem to be different from the name of the animal that we get them from, or the name of the creature, I should say, when we talk about fish. We usually talk about marine animals. But yeah, why do we use beef to talk about meat from cows and pork to talk about meat from pigs? But when we talk about chicken or fish, we leave those two alone. Well, we're telling you the reason, and it goes back in history to when the Normans invaded England and conquered the Anglo-Saxons. And back then, the Anglo-Saxons, of course, spoke Old English, a really antique language, you could say. It's hard for Tom and I to understand it ourselves. No one speaks it really, but you can see the written language. But back then, of course, if you're conquered by another nation or people who speak a different language, they will of course, force you to do what they say. So they imposed various measures of oppression. They said, you will use our language. And this is how we came to have these different terms for dishes that came from different animals.
You might have similar examples here in Taiwan when the Japanese ruled Taiwan from 1895 to 1945. They may have imposed Japanese words into the Taiwanese language. But of course, we've got the Normans here, and they spoke French. And so they introduced their language, and they used French words for the meat that appeared on their tables. Meanwhile, at the same time, the Old English words were still used by the Anglo-Saxons who farmed and herded the animals. They were the people who took care of the animals, but the Normans used their Old French words for the meat that appeared on their tables. And such was the Norman influence on England that their terms for meat have stuck around in the modern English language for cuisine. Okay, so such was the Norman influence. That was the Norman influence, and that resulted in them coming up with terms for meat, and those terms for meat still exist. And, of course, they're existing for cuisine, which is just basically different kinds of food.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that our author uses such was the Norman influence. As Tom said, it just means that was the Norman influence. Such refers back to the situation that was just explained earlier in those sentences. So that was the situation. They had a lot of influence on England. So their terms for meat have stuck around, even though they no longer have control over the English, of course. So let's look at cow and beef. It's not just adult cows that acquired a new name. We know that this also applied to the younger cows, which are called calves. If it's plural, it's C-A-L-V-E-S. Singular is calf. So a young cow is called a calf, but when it's transformed into meat and becomes a dish on someone's table to eat from, it's called veal, V-E-A-L. I must say I've never eaten veal, and I'm not young anymore, but I just always thought it was kind of mean to kill the little ones, so I just thought, ooh, I don't really want to eat the little ones. They're kind of cute. It's hard if you associate them very closely with the animal.
I think I had veal once when I was a kid, but I had no idea what it was.
Yeah.
I think my parents would say, oh, that's meat from a young cow or from a baby cow.
Doesn't it taste the same, Tom?
I don't remember. That was many, many years ago.
Yeah.
I remember it was being kind of soft, kind of tender, so maybe that's why people like to eat it.
It's more expensive. I think that's one other reason I haven't had it. My mom wouldn't tend to buy, the most expensive type of meat growing up.
Indeed. So again, a young cow is called a calf. And, of course, the meat from the calf is called veal. Go figure why that is.
It's weird, huh?
I guess that's because of the Norman influence.
Yeah.
And now let's talk about the example of pig and pork. Okay, if you have a pig and you chop him up and you cut the meat out of him, well, then you have pork, okay? And as well as the word pig, which, like cow, has Old English origins, the Anglo-Saxons used to use the word swine for these animals, which still exists today. If you want to insult somebody, you say, oh, you swine, how could you do that to me? But in any case here, we're talking about the word pig and the meat for it, which is pork. And again, it has Old English origins, at least the word for pig. And the Anglo-Saxons, their word was swine, okay? So in addition to the word pig, we've got another word for pigs used by Anglo-Saxons, and that was the word swine. And they don't really use it so much anymore, but we do know what it means.
Yeah, we do. It's kind of funny, but you do hear swine being used as an insult word if you want to call someone a swine. Now, chicken is one of several exceptions to this general change in terminology. So how is it an exception? We'll talk about that. What does exception mean? First of all, it's a vocabulary word. It just means a person or a thing that is not included in some general statement. So I could say, most of the drink shops in my neighborhood are new, with the exception of one that's next door to me. It was just opened a couple of weeks ago. So an exception, it's left out of a general group or statement that you're talking about. And as you know, if you study English, we have lots of exceptions to our rules of grammar. We apologize. That's just English. So chicken was one of the exceptions. It got to keep some of what it started out as. Now, the Normans used the French word poulet, and they still use that word in France or any place they speak French for chicken meat. And this became pullet, like pullet. In English, we don't use that word in America, but it's interesting. This word is only really utilized or put into use by chicken farmers. And it refers to young hens that are less than a year old. I had to look that up.
Right, so it refers to young hens. It talks about them. It has to do with them. And no one is quite sure why this happened or why this occurred. Now let's talk about the other exception here, fish. Okay, here's another exception. Because fish is fish, as fish is fish, regardless of whether it's swimming in a river or gracing a dinner table. So basically we're saying, yeah, it's a fish whether it's swimming in a river or in the ocean, and it's also fish when it is served on a dinner table. Of course, a fish is countable, and then the meat is non-countable. We should say that. How much fish did you eat? Oh, I ate 20 pounds of fish.
Yeah, be careful with that. Gracing is kind of a fun word. We use it to joke around with, but I'll give you the serious definition first. If something graces something else, it just means you're honoring something. So to grace a dinner table means, oh, well, you're honoring us with your presence or the fact that you're here. But if you're with friends and you're being sarcastic, maybe you have a party and a friend comes late, you could say, oh, yeah, thanks for gracing us with your presence, meaning, oh, thanks for showing up. Finally, maybe they're really late. But it's we use it kind of to joke around with people now, to grace someone with your presence. You're so lucky I'm here because I'm wonderful. So we do use it that way. So one possibility for why the French word poisson is French for fish, has never entered the English language, is that it sounds too much like a scary word, and that's poison. Poison is something that's toxic and that can make you sick or kill you. So we haven't adopted that particular word. We're out of time. We're going to listen to our Chinese teacher one more time, and then we'll be back to say goodbye.
那再来呢，请看到原来啊，是因为法国人他们要英国人呢来服务他们，所以他们在下达指令的时候讲这些餐桌上的食物，他会用法文来讲他要吃哪些东西。那所以咯，法文的这些肉的单字就保留在英文里面了。那所以我们请同学看到第5个句子，这些英国人他们还是要养牲畜嘛，要养殖，还要放牧牲畜，所以动物的名字他们其实还是用动物的单字，还是用原本英文的单字。请同学看到第5个句子这里有讲到有些盎格鲁撒克逊人他们是从事农业的，那所以这些 The Anglo-Saxons who farmed and herded the animals， 也就是养殖和放牧牲畜的这一群盎格鲁撒克逊人，原本的这些英国人，他们还是用原本的英文单字来指这些动物。请特别注意第6个句子有个特殊的句型 such that， 这边的意思就是说诺曼人对英格兰的影响如此之大，这是一个连接词连接了2个子句，就这个影响这么大，以至于这些诺曼人就讲法文的人对肉类的所用的这些单字一直保存在现代的英文当中。好，请同学特别注意到 stuck around， 意思就是这些用法呢到现在还是存在的。stick around 原型是 stick around， 那在这里呢它用现在完成式表示这些名称呢它还是存在在现代英文当中。好，接着我们看到课文就告诉我们说哪一些动物它的动物的名称跟肉类有所差别。那请同学请看到牛是 cow， 牛肉呢是 beef， 而猪是 pig， 猪肉呢是 pork， 但是鸡跟鱼呢是没有差别的。好，现在同学是不是对于英文的单字更加了解了呢？那以后同学请特别注意讲到猪跟牛的时候要记住，猪肉是 pork， 那牛肉是 beef， 我们并不会说 pig's meat 或 cow's meat。好，以上是我们针对这一课课文所做的中文讲解，谢谢大家。
That's it, guys. Thanks so much for joining us. This was our history unit. We'll have some more great and informative things to share with you if you'll join us for our next program. For English Digest, I'm Stephanie.
And I'm Tom. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.